Hi to all, I am Dr. Vidana and I am happy to be presenting this textual analysis which I have titled Embracing Diversity at College Level, a Critical Analysis of Español Escrito, Spanish for Heritage Language Speakers. The purpose of this study is to argue in favor of diversity within Spanish college level courses, especially those offered for Spanish heritage language speakers. In it, I will attempt to critically analyze a college-level textbook titled Español Escrito, used in a higher education institution in the Southwest, which shows that while there are education models for heritage language speakers, these models tend to be based on purist ideologies of language. The major arguments and findings revolve around the following main question. How do we embrace diversity for heritage language learners and avoid oppression within the classrooms? Other sub-questions include what is language and how do we teach it? To make a small parenthesis, I like to highlight that we are using the definition for a heritage language learner based on Guadalupe Valdez's work. In this case, a heritage language learner is defined as a student who is raised in a home where a non-English language is spoken, who speaks or at least understands the language, and who is in some degree bilingual in that language and in English. This is important to know as this will be the definition that we'll be basing on. Now, in this case, it's also important to know how language is defined, which we will see in just a bit. When it comes to language, there are many elements to consider given that the ability to learn a language is innate. In this sense, as we know, language develops spontaneously by exposure to linguistic input. And interestingly, we learn to comprehend language before we learn how to speak it. The five main components of language, which is stated complex yet systematic and describable, are phonemes, morphemes, syntax, discourse, and semantics. As part of a framework, we are looking at how language is defined. For many scholars like Shaika, language is defined as a complex, uniquely human communication system that allows us to externalize our thought. It is a social convention that is multi-layered. And interestingly, if the function of a language is to communicate, and language is language as long as it serves such a function, again, to communicate, the main question here that we're basing on is, why are schools underestimating any variation of what is considered as standard, quote-unquote, specifically when it comes to a student's first language? And this study builds upon a framework on linguistic oppression, the current definition of heritage language learners as defined by Valdez, and possible implications to teaching methodology being used at a college level for heritage language speakers, in the case specifically for Spanish heritage language speakers. As mentioned, the book of Español Escrito was written by both Teschner and Valdez, and it can be seen as stated by the title, it was meant to be designed for heritage language speakers, whom are considered to be bilingual as pinpointed by the definition we have previously seen by Valdez. The analysis of the textbook includes a detailed examination of content and express objectives. For purposes of this presentation, the analysis has been, in this case, shortened. The three major findings that revolved from this textual analysis were, number one, there is a heavy focus on grammar. Number two, there is a limited view of language. And number three, there is a purist language ideology. For finding number one on this textual analysis, the focus of the book is solely on grammar and not even close to speaking skills. Such can be reflected perfectly in the book content outline and the book content itself, as can be seen reflected on sample number one. It can be noted that the emphasis on grammar is not only major, but it is the only focus the book has. Furthermore, if looking at sample number two, one can see that there is a total disregard of a student's funds of prior knowledge. This book is not for any kind of heritage language learner, but it is for college heritage language learners, And the first thing that they have to learn is how to write a sentence. Please look at the underlined portion in yellow. It is important to note that in any circumstance, given that perhaps any of these heritage language learners was from the second or third generation, one's native language, in this case whether English or Spanish, even serves as the fundamental base for second language literacy development. According to research, academic proficiency transfers across languages. To take a look at finding number 2, where we see a limited view of language, given that students' prior knowledge is not even considered within the textbook, one can also argue that neither is the book close to having an integration of the students. That is, the view it has of language itself is limited to the function of reading and writing, and such functions are extremely narrow. The only readings within the book belong to authors of the canon who are renowned for having a mastery of the standard language uses of Spanish, such as Elena Poniatowska, amongst others, and the writing assignments are strictly linked to this type of selected reading, which takes us to wonder, what about non-literary uses? Basically, there are none. Out of the few possible readings that could be considered part of the student voice is a small counted selection of written essays by Colombian students that belong to the same university's creative writing department and who somehow claim as writers to adhere to what they consider the most valuable and prestigious forms of language of the standard, subsequent as sample of the book objectives and text sample as can be seen on picture number 3. As can be seen in this observed picture, the functions of language are without a doubt only attached to a limited number of language functions, amongst them reading, and again, it is certainly abundant in grammatical instruction. Needless to say, language is not limited to a review of neither grammar nor learning, but rather in 4 major skills, these being reading, writing, speaking, and listening, restricting the other 2 functions of language if without a shadow of a doubt promoting a limited view of language, not to mention once more that there is a huge focus on grammar rather than on speaking skills of the classroom intended population, which again in this case I want to highlight it is for heritage language speakers. If looking at sample number 4, this reading selection gives proof of the non-integration of student voices, and furthermore, when one looks at the entire book, one realizes that all of the places related to heritage language learning go from Latin America to Spain, but never talk or mention border regions and or the United States where they reside and have developed as Spanish heritage language learners. For finding number 3, where there is a purist language ideology, another conclusion that can be done from the book analysis is that it is guided by purist language ideologies. It clearly does not allow for language variation, nor does it consider the importance of diverse functions that language can have. A perfect example can be seen here on picture example number 5. This picture shows how no language mixing, no border Spanish, no Spanglish, no colloquial Spanish is allowed to be used, and neither is any of these variations appreciated. Students are directly being told that if they use any of these non-standard words, they are incorrect, for the correct is only that is established by the Real Academia Española. The use of heavy focus on grammar, a limited view of language, and a presence of a purist language ideologies eventually affect how heritage language learners will see language, and it will influence their identity. Other approaches should be used in place that include but are not limited to the creation of a third space and an additive approach. Gutierrez explains that the creation of a third space is an effort of the teacher to meet the student at halfway. That is, the teacher becomes aware of what the student knows and manages to bridge between what is considered academic or formal language, and community non-formal language, such as that with an additive approach in which more knowledge is being built upon the student's prior knowledge, but never is the student's abilities undermined nor underestimated or subtracting. By creating a third space for students, such will be engaged and will comfortably participate as they expand their understanding of the formal and non-formal language uses for specific purposes that are meaningful to them. To conclude, while much has been researched, the truth is that in analyzing the application of such discoveries, schools are falling short as no or low implementation of positive practices like the creation of a third space and or the additive approach are taking place, giving way to linguistic oppression. Despite Valdez' acclaimed contributions to the study of heritage language learners in Español escrito, the opposite is seen. This, as one can see three major findings that go against what she so strongly seems to denounce. That is, one again, a heavy focus on grammar, a limited view of language, and three, a presence of a purist language ideologies which are hurting heritage language learners. If the main function of language is to communicate, why are schools limiting communication instead of building upon a student's home background and integrating them authentically within the textbooks? Past struggles cannot be ignored, nor can findings like this, one for in doing so, we are contributing to a denial of diversity. Gracias.